Welcome back to Get Your Voice Out There. I'm Roberta Chadis, and today is yet another special show with an incredible person named Henry Cameron Allen. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure to
We are really thrilled to
you.
have you here, honestly.
Thank you.
I've known you for years from afar, and now I get to see you face to face.
Exciting.
And while we're talking at the very beginning, I'd love for you to tell the audience a little bit about yourself. And at the same time, I want to know more about that wonderful tattoo. Yes.
Well, this was done at Rose Compass Rose Tattoo in Gloucester. It was a gift from a friend, actually, and I really have always been enthralled with this design. I don't know if you viewers can see it, but it's known as a triskelion or a triple spiral. And what's interesting about this symbol is that it is found in every ancient culture around the world, on every continent, painted and carved into cave walls. In South America, it's known in Celtic circles. It's known in East Indian circles. It's even carved into the sidewalks in Fiji. It's everywhere that I've been in the world, and I've noticed that. And so for some cultures, it's seen as the goddess symbol, like the 3 trimesters of pregnancy, or land, sea, and sky, or birth, life, and death. Anything that comes in threes, the Trinity. Everybody sees in it what they see. But for me, what it symbolizes is that we all have our own unique path. We all have our own sort of journey that we're on. And even though we're all different, we still can live harmoniously together. And I think that's a really important message for me, for our time, and through the work that I do.
It's the power of 3.
The
power of 3 is very important in speaking and getting your voice out there, because people listen to 3 points usually, and that also reminds me of a labyrinth too. So thank you for explaining that.
Oh, absolutely. It's a special thing. It's also the symbol of my theater company,
which is the next thing we're going to talk about. And we do have a picture, which we're going to bring up, of your logo.
And you'll see this, this symbol.
So we're going to talk about the Folklore Theater Company.
That's right.
Great. You're on.
Well, I moved here from Minnesota to Cape Ann in 2009, a year after I lost my son, Cameron, to brain cancer. And I had studied at the Art Institute of Boston 30 years ago, and someone at that time whispered in my ear, "You've got to go see Gloucester." And I came up on the commuter rail, and I stepped off the train, and before I even saw the beauty of Cape Ann, I felt something hit me right in the solar plexus. You belong here. There's something that smacks of destiny about this place. And, you know, they say that somewhere in the world, there's a place that is your spiritual home, and you'll know it when you arrive. And that's how I felt 30 years ago when I came up here. But I didn't come back for 30 years. But anyone who's known me that long has known that my trajectory was Gloucester, Massachusetts. So it's been definitely part of my journey, my conversation. I grew up all over the world. My father was a cultural diplomat for the U.S. Information Agency and Service, USIA, USIS. And his job was to bring American culture overseas to places like Cold War Russia, and Vienna, Austria, and Peru, and Brazil, and Cuba, and to really bring American culture abroad before there was ever a McDonald's outside the U.S. Remember those days?
I do.
Yeah, well,
yes.
That was a very deliberate push before the internet. You know, people got their news from print and from newsreels, radio, and some television, but it was more delayed because it took time to ship that information abroad. And so there wasn't the mass exposure to American culture. So when I came back to the United States in the 80s, the first thing that I noticed that people had stopped telling their stories. Their ancestral stories. I remember sitting at the feet of my grandparents, hearing about their parents' sacrifice and adventure coming from the old country to this place that held so much promise for them and so much opportunity. And I was fascinated to ask them questions like the first car that they rode in, because the car was still not invented when they were young, right? Or radio or television.
Sure.
So to sit and hear from these talking time machines, those stories that really defined history, they witnessed it. They witnessed World War I, World War II. And so I became fascinated with folklore and world culture from a very young age. I was steeped in world culture. And every other country that I had lived in, storytelling was really at the core of the culture. Grandparents lived with the family into, you know, their elder years and beyond. And it was part of who they were. And I missed that when I came back to the United States. And so my journey through theater led me to the National Theater Conservatory, where I finished my master's program. And then I was in Minneapolis, Minnesota for a long time, did a lot of theater there, also got involved in Waldorf education, where storytelling is also at the core of the curriculum. And so it was a natural fit for me. And then that led me to Gloucester, and looking for the holes in the community. Where do I fit in here? I noted that there were sometimes plays, historic plays that would pop up from time to time, but there was no central theater company holding those stories that were otherwise dying in the community, dying with the people that carried them. They're not teaching local history in school anymore. Most public schools don't.
Yeah.
And families are so disconnected now because they're so busy, or because of technology and lack of time. They're not sharing their ancestral stories as they used to. And so I thought, this is my calling. This is really where this deep joy in my soul meets a great need in the world. This is my calling. This is where I'm meant to be. And to bring this theater company to life, we actually started out as the Cape Ann. That was the name of the company. Because we were in a building that was historic. It was Gloucester's first hotel, and I thought, the Cape Ann, it sounds like a building. It sounds like a space. But we were there for 2 years, and we were kind of priced out. We were paying over $5,000 a month in rent, just in rent. So that was impossible to sustain. And so we became kind of a gypsy company. We closed the doors. We acknowledged that the work we were bringing into the space, the magic, was not in the walls, it was in the people. And so we could really do it anywhere. And for 2 years, we moved around from venue to venue, creating original theater with those places that inspired the work as the backdrop. And it was kind of wonderful. And then now we are back downtown in Gloucester at the Floating Lotus, which is a new World Cultural Center right in the heart of downtown, right on Main Street.
Now, is that the picture that I should pull up next?
Yes, that's our studio space,
All right, so let's
and it's beautiful.
Pull up picture number 3, please.
The acoustics are gorgeous, and it's a very whimsical spot because we look right out over the inner harbor, right out the window, right out the door. And so to have that scene as the backdrop for our plays is quite stunning. And
we have a little picture of you also, the next picture, number 4.
Yes.
So that's...
Oh, my cast is always getting on me about my long curtain speeches. Because I think it's important to talk about who we are, because no other theater company is really doing what we're doing. The Mass Cultural Council has said to me that we are probably the only theater company in the country who's doing exactly what we're doing. We are a community theater in the tradition of community theater, meaning that we're a volunteer, amateur company that is specifically for the purpose of preserving the stories of a unique community, place-specific storytelling.
Yes, and what's so beautiful is you would never know you were amateurs. It is a professional production from the beginning to the end.
Well, let me clarify.
Right.
Thank you for that. You know, we have a high standard. We keep our shows minimalist because the stories themselves really are the centerpiece. It's not all the bells and whistles. We do have wonderful costumes. We do have, you know, that whimsy that takes you on the journey that having a budget might do, you know.
And is the other picture that I have of you applying makeup, that's picture number 5?
We have we're all volunteers, myself included, and we all do multiple things. We all help with costumes, we all help with makeup. Even me, you know, I'm producing, I'm directing, I'm writing, I'm designing, and I'm doing makeup and props and tech. I'm running tech and everything. And it's just, you know, it's like I feel like a vaudevillian plate spinner half the time. But when I say amateur, I don't mean it in the conventional sense of being unpolished or unprofessional or less than you know, what you would expect a professional production to be. The root of the word amateur means one who does it for love. Amateur.
I love to learn something new every day. No, I didn't know that. That's
But now
fabulous.
that you think of it, and you think of the word, ama means love, tour means one who does,
I'll
right?
never forget this.
So one who does it for love, and that's really who our company is. Everybody who's involved, everyone who dedicates hours of time and creativity and talent, we all are there to do it for love, and our audiences are there for love as well. We don't charge a standard fee for tickets. It's all a suggested donation so that anyone who loves theater can come to the theater without the excuse of I can't afford it. Right? It's affordable for all. It's accessible to all. We had a family. The makeup picture I was that was for the Lobster Cracker Ballet, which is kind of a pantomime that we do every other Christmas season. And we had a family come into the theater who had just lost their jobs, both parents. And they put their children aside and they came to the box office. I was also working box office that day. And they said, listen, we've both lost our jobs. We're out of work. And our kids are getting dollar store junk for Christmas this year. We're all stressed out. We've had a really rough time. And it's taken its toll on our family. We want to give our children an experience that they can remember this time with love and joy. And we dug in the sofa, we dug in all of our pockets and bags, and we managed to pull together $10 for our whole family. Is that okay? And I said, no, that's not okay. Your money's no good here. Take the kids out to Friendly's for ice cream after the show. Merry Christmas.
Oh,
and
that's the way to do
they
it.
got very, you know, they were very grateful and moved. And the people behind them in line also heard that conversation. And they gave us a check for $200 to cover that family and anyone else who might need it, that performance.
It's unbelievable.
That to me is community theater, or what it should be anyway.
It is. And I'm also interested in you telling our audience about the age group in your theater because, well, I'll let you do it.
We're an intergenerational company. That's been the case from the beginning. I think it's very important in being a folkloric theater that our younger performers are learning from people who are, like I say, living time machines. And so our youngest actors are 4 and 5 years old, and our oldest are in their 80s. So far, we haven't had anyone in their 90s yet, but come on. But it's wonderful to see the relationships that develop that you can't do on Facebook or online or anywhere else. You know, it's a great way to bridge people. And
yes, and you're teaching them because we have a little audience here on our show that's quietly watching. We're practicing some skills, and I was thrilled to have them join you.
Our Summer Stock Theater Club, we take the children all over Cape Ann, and we walk and we talk, we tell the stories of the places, and then they come together in the second week. It's a 2-week program, and they write a play based on what they've learned, and it's inspired by what they've learned. So right now, for instance, they're doing a time travel show that takes them back to the Revolutionary War period in Gloucester, because they learned about some characters of that time that were influential in the development of our country when it was new. And so they want to explore how might something change at that time, say having a woman president, say Judith Sargent Murray became president in 1776.
Who would think? I know.
What would the world be like today, right? So to take them on that journey of imagination that's founded where they live, and by interviewing people of all ages, then they're learning firsthand in the tradition of storytelling. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing.
And they are lucky to have you.
I'm the lucky one, really. And they learn patience. They learn also not only how to be an actor, but also how to be a good audience and what it means to take it in and be. The value of being bored sometimes is kind of a great thing, to quiet yourself and to just be.
No,
is
it
a
is
very
important.
special thing.
It's
Yeah.
very important to develop those listening skills for school,
right.
to be a good leader. If you don't listen, sometimes you miss the points.
And there are cultures in our world where young people are not getting those skills because they are disconnected from their foundational history.
Exactly.
I was telling you about a phone call I received out of the blue from the United Nations, who called me up and said, Henry, we hear about the good work you're doing in Gloucester, Massachusetts, and we would like to send you to Fiji.
Yes, and that was the next picture I wanted to show.
Oh, good
yes,
timing.
that's so funny. Picture number 6, yes.
They wanted me to develop a workshop in creative activism for youth in that country using folkloric theater as a tool. And I went to Fiji for 2 weeks, and I worked with about 30 youth from all over that country, from varied experiences in life. Some were urban youth and some were provincial country youth. And they all came together, and their foundational history, especially amongst the native population, has been kept sort of at bay. They don't know their foundational stories anymore. And therefore, they couldn't envision a future for their country because they were moving from a very oppressive military dictatorship into the first democratic elections in over a generation. And they didn't know how to meet it. And so the UN sent me there to give them the gift of remembering their ancestry and the warrior people that they are from.
It's like a legacy.
The legacy that they
Yeah.
carry in their DNA. And what became apparent to me in that journey was that all islands connect underwater, right?
Yes.
We are all the same. We
Yes.
all are defined by our history and who lives in our bodies, right? Everything we love about ourselves, we've inherited in our DNA from those who walked before us. All of our distant bloodlines,
Yes.
all the way back to our common ancestors.
I know. So I'm going to bring us back to Gloucester.
Yes.
There's a picture number 8, I believe, of you on what looks to be a boat, looking
Yes.
out at the water. And I also want to then bring us into the story about Cameron.
Well, they're tied.
I'm glad.
These stories.
I'm glad.
Like I said, when I was here 30 years ago, I knew that I would end up here someday. And since my son Cameron was a little boy, we had talked about the day that we would move to Gloucester together. When he was done with high school was the plan, that we would move here and we would start some kind of a creative venture together. Actually, we had talked about a retreat center, a creative retreat center to bridge people to their innate creativity as human beings. And he graduated early, is how I think of it. And I moved here for both of us a year after he passed.
And I'd like to bring up the picture of you and Cameron.
Yeah,
I
that was
think it's
special.
picture number 8.
He had acquired, we don't know how, anaplastic astrocytoma.
Which is quite a mouthful.
I'll never forget it. Since the first moment I heard it, I never forgot it. Anaplastic means that it grows very, very rapidly, mutates very rapidly. Astrocytoma, is tumor, and astrocytes are star-shaped cells that have these arms that reach out and just grab onto everything around them. It spreads very, very fast. And it's typically a kind of brain cancer that's only found in men over 45, Caucasian men specifically. So it was so random that an 11-year-old child would have developed this particular brain cancer. Sadly, pediatric cancers are becoming less and less rare. But this one was one of the rarer kinds. And so we imagined it as a ball of stars in his head. And he did a lot of creative imagining, to heal himself. He lived twice as long as they expected him to.
He's a beautiful boy, really.
Which is kind of an amazing, and you can see it in his face. You can see it behind his eyes. Since he was a baby, people had said about him, that kid's got one foot with the angels. He always had something special about him. And he wasn't fearful at all, because he knew I was a survivor. I was a cancer survivor myself, which took our journey to a whole other level. And I knew, for me, when he was diagnosed, it became clear why I had cancer before him. so that I could walk with him on his journey in a very unique way and eliminate his fear, his anxiety, his anger, everything he was certainly entitled to have. He did a series of video blogs on YouTube, and one of them, he talked about his own mortality. He was still 12, he was 13 when he passed. That picture is a year into his disease. And look how beautiful he looks.
Absolutely.
And it was about that time that he said, you know, I haven't had to think about life or death much before. I know I want to survive this, but if I don't, that's okay with me because I'll be able to help even more people. Maybe not physically anymore, but spiritually and emotionally. He said it's kind of like that last scene in Star Wars where Obi-Wan Kenobi and Darth Vader in their final battle, and Obi-Wan says, if you strike me down, I'll become more powerful than you can possibly imagine. He said, that's how I feel about my cancer. If it takes my life and strikes me down, I'll just become more powerful than anyone can imagine. And he was right. He was so right, because look at what's come into the world because of him. This theater would not exist had he not left the planet when he was meant to. And before every performance, we stand together as a company and hold hands, and we thank him for leaving when he was supposed to, because otherwise we wouldn't be doing this incredible work. But isn't that the message? That we all have a ripple effect that we can't even imagine in the world. Fiji would never have happened had Cameron not passed away.
I totally agree with you. I'd like to bring up the Brain Candy Project video picture, but I always think that when there's a tragedy or when there is someone so special like Cameron, they are there for a reason. They bring this amazing strength that you may never have had in the world. And, you know, for someone like yourself to have had this child, and now he continues to live, really.
Well,
in your project.
It's totally blown my idea and perspective on death out of the water. I don't believe in death anymore, right? If we know through physics and medicine that we are energy, right? And it's been proven by physics that energy cannot be born, nor can it be killed.
I'm with you with this one.
It just transfers and transforms. And so he's still very present and in fact informs everything that I do. All of these kids think of him like a brother. They all know him. They know him by name. We even have a space in our theater called Cameron's Corner. Another thing that would not have developed had he not passed was the Brain Candy Project. When he was in the hospital and he was incapacitated for about 2 months after his brain surgery to remove the tumor, he had to learn how to talk again, how to walk again, how to hold a cup, sit up in bed, all those things we take for granted. It was like having an infant learning those things all over again. And when he developed his speech ability, one of the first things he talked about was how he saw people coming into the hospital and caring for me and bringing me food and bringing me clean clothes and comfort items, an air mattress so I didn't have to sleep on that horrible chair. And he knew that there were families in that hospital where we were that were coming from other parts of the state, rural communities, other states, even other countries. We were at the Mayo Clinic, and people come from all over the world, leaving their community support, right? And so to be isolated with your child during those difficult, difficult times, whether it's weeks, months, or sometimes years, a world apart from your community, and they feel helpless because they can't be there to support you. How do you hold parents so parents can hold their children? That was the conversation we had. And the Brain Candy Project came about to support those families who are far from home, fighting for their children's lives while they're in the hospital, and even the aftercare. What happens after the hospital? Whether or not your child survives, you're changed forever when you've been in a critical time with your child's health. And we don't talk about PTSD around this kind of caregiving, but it's very much there.
I know.
And there's been no conversation, no support. Do you know that there's not even a word like widow or orphan for a parent who's outlived a child?
I hadn't really thought about it, but I do know people who have lost children, and
the dinghy is cut loose.
Yeah.
You're expected to just pick up and continue and get over your grief and move on, so everyone else is comfortable.
I know.
Well, it's not always comfortable.
No, it's
but
not
it's important
always
to talk
comfortable.
about. And if you're, God forbid, a widow or an orphan, and people say, "Oh, are you married?" You can say, "Oh, I'm a widow." Enough said. You don't have to talk about it if you don't want to. But when someone asks, "Do you have any children?" to a parent who's lost a child or more,
That's true.
how do you have to talk about it and go through it and relive it. There's no choice.
Well, thank God we now have an opportunity to reach out to you. And I want you to tell our audience how to reach you. And then I want to make sure that we talk about your music and your dog.
And my dog and my spiritual humanism and all of that.
Yes.
We only have half an hour.
We have to end on a happy note.
It's all happy. It's all you know. People think of losing your child, losing my child as a tragedy, and of course it has its tragic moments and parts. But it really to look at his life as a triumph is where I choose to live with it, and look at the impact that his life, as well as his passing, has had on the world. It's been a very beautiful thing. I want to help people see things from that perspective, and I became ordained as a spiritual humanist clergy so that I could work with people through their grief and find good grief, you know? And so if you go to henryallen.org,
spell that.
www.henryallen.org.
There you go.
You can find there about my counseling work that I do. There's a link to the Folklore Theater Company, and there's a link to the Brain Candy Project. It's kind of my central location for people to find me. And whether they want to be involved with the theater or as a volunteer with the Brain Candy Project. Remember Candy Stripers?
I do.
Well, we have Brain Candy Stripers.
Oh, gosh.
And these are people all over the country who sort of keep their ears open for a family who may be from far away, who has no local support. And so we have this wonderful organization where they'll bring the family things like, you know, good food and help with clean clothes or help pay bills, whatever.
And Henry, when you told me that your title, which I laughed, but I'm not laughing, as the Renaissance man.
That came from Cameron. He was in school and his teacher asked the kids, what do your parents do for a living? And he stood up, he said, my papa's a Renaissance man. I don't know where that came from. I never taught him that.
Well, you sing.
But I do, I sing.
Act.
I have a band actually called Henry Allen and the New Swing Set that also exists because of Cameron. You see how powerful he is?
It's powerful.
We do every year, April 16th, no matter what day of the week, we do Cameron's Feast as a benefit for the Brain Candy Project. And I wanted to sing at this benefit in honor of my son. And I just moved here and I knew nobody. I did not know one single person when I moved here, and let alone musicians. So I put a desperately seeking ad out on Craigslist. And I got these wonderful musicians who came together an hour before the event without any rehearsal. And we sounded so good together that we decided, hey, we got to start a band.
I know.
And they said, well, you've got a name and it's got to be Henry Allen and something. You know, call us whatever you want. And the only image that came to me was in 1968, take you back. You remember the A-frame swing set that you got from Sears, red, white, and blue? It had that metal slide that you burned your tuchus on in the summer. Yeah, the teeter-totter, right?
Yeah.
I just remember how joyful I was when I got that, when I was 2 or 3 years old. And I thought, nothing's better than a new swing set. Oh, Henry Allen and the new swing set. We do at least a set of swings. So
very clever.
There
very
it is.
Clever.
So that's how that came about.
So Henry, maybe we'll have you back on Get Your Voice Out There. What do
I
you
would
think?
love to. This is
We can
fun.
talk about your music. We can talk about your dog.
Ollie, my dachshund.
Yeah.
Yep, he's going to be 17.
We'll end with
Amazing.
that photo of you and your dog.
He was with me with Cameron, and he's sort of my last family tie to Cameron, and so he's getting on, but boy, does he keep me grounded.
I think it's great, and I want to thank you so very much.
Thank you
because
for
we got
having
to know a lot about you.
Tip of the iceberg. There's so much. I'm the busiest man in show business.
I think it's great. Thank you so much,
Thank
Henry.
you. Thanks.
Yes. And my name's Roberta Chadis. I am delighted to have this show, Get Your Voice Out There. We'll see you again soon. Thank you.